mild dizziness, not all the time, just sort of if I got up from the sofa, and I just had to stand there and wait for the room to come back in.
When you're living with stage 4 lung cancer, we know that it can go to the brain. That is something we fear heavily, as is developing what's called leptomeningeal disease. This is exactly what happened to Julia 8 years in to her stage 4 ROS1 positive lung cancer. In this episode, she describes the signs and symptoms that were happening and what's happened next. Patient Voices is proudly supported by sponsors who have no editorial control over the content. Hi, everyone. My name is Yvonne Diaz. I'm a co-founder of Oncogene Cancer Research, and I'm really pleased to be joined again with Julia. In part 1 of our story, Julia shared how she was diagnosed with stage 4 ROS1 positive lung cancer. Towards the end of that episode, she discussed how she faced progression just 2 years ago in the brain. That turned out to be what's known as leptomeningeal disease. Today, we're going to take a deep dive into what that experience was like. So welcome back, Julia.
Thank you.
So maybe refresh us a little bit. So it started off with some dizziness. Tell us more about that.
Yeah, it was just mild dizziness, not all the time, just sort of if I got up from the sofa, and I just had to stand there and wait for the room to come back in. And my balance in yoga went to pot. Really. I think it just got to a stage where I thought it's getting too persistent and it doesn't hurt to get it checked out, is what I thought.
And so you rang up your CNS, and it was actually taken super seriously, which is wonderful.
Yeah, yeah, because I'm not I'm not one to ring up. I think if I did ring up, then they knew that something was serious. So yeah, she said run it past the oncologist, and then they said they're waiting for you in A&E. So I just walked in and told my name, and then went straight off. No hanging about.
Thank goodness. The one thing we do hear from our community is that leptomeningeal disease, which is basically when the lung cancer spreads into the membranes of the brain and the spinal fluid. So it seems like it's hard to diagnose, right? Because you had just had a clear
Yeah.
brain scan. You do hear that MRIs don't often pick this up.
Yeah.
So what were they doing to identify what was going on, and were there false signals?
Beforehand, I mean, that was the first brain scan I'd had in years. They just sort of said, because of you've been a long time patient, we're going to introduce them more regularly. But I think it is quite hard to see in the early stages in the leptomeningeal area because of it's quite a small space, isn't it? I've not seen that scan, so I don't know if it was missed or not visible to the naked eye. It's difficult to say. And also, I did have a pain in the back of my neck, and I had been to the osteopath with it, and she was like, "Oh, everything feels fine." And I hadn't thought of that as a symptom at all.
And they did another MRI in hospital, and that was also negative, is that right?
They'd done a CT in,
Is it a
yeah, and that was negative. And then when I did have the MRI, it was when it was sent off to King's to be compared to the one previously.
and that's when they saw it.
Yeah. So whether it was just fast growing, I don't know.
Right,
But
okay.
I did seem to go downhill pretty quickly from that point onwards.
Goodness. And what do you mean by going downhill? Were your symptoms deteriorating quite quickly?
The double vision obviously was one of them. And I couldn't walk across a room. I was like drunk on a ship. I was all over the place. And that was getting worse and worse. And when I was just discharged from hospital, I had to go up to Guy's, and my mum and my husband had to come with me because there's no way I would have been able to travel on my own.
For sure.
It was such a hot summer and it was stifling in there, and I just wanted to be at home in my own comfort with my family, really.
I don't blame you. And then how did you find out? So finally they did call and let you know. Is that at Guy's, is that where you found out it was the LMD?
Still, I was still in hospital when they told me. CNS and oncologist came up to the ward and told me.
And did you know anything about leptomeningeal disease at that point, or was this just a strange word?
Yeah, I was like, what? What? Yeah. Every time I like to say, can you write it in my phone so I know what it's called?
Mm,
Yeah, never even heard of it.
okay.
Yeah.
And you
And I was like, well, this is the final act, I think. I've dodged it for 8 years and here it is. That's what I thought.
my goodness. And then what happened next?
Well, the oncologist, he applied to NHS England for entrectinib because that does pass the brain into the brain better than crizotinib, but it was a first line treatment as well as crizotinib is. So that was turned down. But my friend actually had recently had spread to the brain, and they had applied to, or they was doing the paperwork for Pfizer to apply for lorlatinib on compassionate grounds. So the paperwork was already done. So basically, he just had to change the name and send it off. So it was done really quickly, and it got granted within weeks. I was up at Guy's getting my first rounds of lorlatinib.
And how quickly was it effective for you? How did you feel?
Yeah, the dizziness started to go within first couple of weeks. I've noticed a big difference. I mean, 'cause when I was a guy, they gave me one of those, those trolleys with the seat on it.
Yes.
Yeah, I was like, as soon as the dizziness went, I was like, well, that's going. But my kids loved it. They used to slide up and down the house on it, like doing wheelies and stuff.
Someone put it to use.
Yeah, so it was quite quick that it started working, and was going sort of walking around the close like every day, and then I was doing it without the trolley, and yeah, the dizziness just sort of, because it just sort of goes out gradually. It's not like a big, oh, I'm not dizzy anymore. It's sort of something that you think, it's sort of a gradual thing that, yeah, then all of a sudden you're like, oh, I haven't been dizzy for ages, but yeah.
Is that interesting? It's not like an on-off switch.
Yeah.
You're like, "Hold on a second, something's different." That's amazing. Well, that's fantastic, and but you were still suffering with this double vision and
Yeah.
to wear these special eyeglasses, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So, here you are, you're in your early 50s, right? And you've been given a walking trolley, you're
Yeah.
dizzy, you hear these words and the double vision, my goodness, it's, pretty changing circumstances from 5 years of forgetting about cancer, right? From
Yeah.
one thing
Yeah.
to this. How did things go? You gradually were getting better.
Yeah. Yeah. Gradually getting better. My mum and my one of my friends was really good. They would come and sort of take me out because obviously we live in quite a secluded part of Biggin Hill, so there's no transport here, and it was like quite isolating because I couldn't go out on my own anywhere 'cause you can't drive, you can't walk anywhere. Yeah, so it was quite isolating for at the beginning.
Yeah. And then one day you woke up and you just noticed you could see without your
Yeah.
glasses.
Yeah, well, the first scans I think were after 2 months, and I was basically feeling fairly back to normal apart from the double vision, and they both were no evidence of disease on the brain or the lungs, which was like a wow moment. They said to me because of the nerve damage, the double vision is permanent. So, yeah, so I sort of mourned the old me really at that point, thinking, oh, well, I'm alive, but, I'm different.
And now you've been on lorlatinib a year and a half, almost 2 years, right? you're feeling pretty well, right?
After about 3 months, just woke up one day and, like before, I was like, "I can see out of both eyes," and the eye hospital said, "It's gone." I'm definitely very fortunate.
That's incredible. And I remember you sharing with me for the first time you had clear lungs and a clear brain. So that was quite a remarkable thing because you've always seen some disease, right, on your
Yeah,
scans?
yeah,
Very potent. And you're on the full dose of lorlatinib
yes,
and yeah,
yeah,
you feel okay on that. That's wonderful. So, and now that you are living with LMD, has your routine changed in terms of scans? So, I imagine they must be scanning your brain
yeah,
every month
every
as
3
well as
months.
your lungs and
Yeah,
everything, right?
yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't like them MRI machines. I think for a claustrophobic girl, it's a bit.
That plus the noise, it's like the
Yeah.
2 pounding. Do you get the music at least? Do they put any music in there?
No, they've never been offered music.
I would
Only
ask them
earplugs.
earplugs.
Yeah. I try and make up my own beats and raps to all the bangs and that's
Yeah,
going on. Yeah.
exactly. Oh, that's amazing. Well, so thank you so much for explaining your experience around LMD because I think it is something that a lot of us are aware of and understanding that these were your signs, your targeted therapy has been effective. So I think there is hope, right? And obviously, there's also a leptomeningeal disease organization. This organization is out there supporting people like
Yeah.
yourself. Yeah.
Yeah. When you Google it, you do tend to get all the horror stories rather than the nice ones.
And that's what's important too. I mean, right? We don't want to just sugarcoat things, but knowing there is hope, that there are good sources and how you advocate for yourself, these are not easy things to do.
Yeah.
Well, thank you again, Julia. We're going to leave it here in this conversation. We're going to come back and talk again. So stay tuned for